At the intersection of true crime and real estate, you'll find Crime Estate. I'm Heather.
And my name is Elena. As real estate agents and true crime junkies, we view crimes through a different lens.
So walk through the door of some of the most notorious true crimes with us and discover how sometimes the scene of the crime has its own story to tell.
Well, hey, y'all. Welcome to today's episode of Crime Estate. I'm Heather, and I'm joined, as always, by my dear friend and fellow Dallas realtor, Elena, and our producer, commentator, partner in all things fun, Melanie. Hey, ladies.
Hey, how are y'all?
Great now. Always one of my favorite times of the week.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I'm tired. We're recording this, the middle of October. The real estate market's been really busy. We've been hopping.
And just October in general is just,
It's
personally,
like the new December.
It's crazy.
Mm.
It's crazy.
But
I'm glad to be here.
I like hearing things have been busy for you because I remember you were saying that this summer was a little slow.
It was unusually slow.
My goal for next summer is to have made all the money I need to make for the summer by May so that I can just leave Dallas when it's hotter than hell.
I'm in.
That's not going to happen, but that would be great.
Well, put it out in the universe. Manifest it. So,
Manifested. I love that. Yeah. So, well, I'm glad to hear things are been good for you. So, who's telling us a story this week?
I am.
You
Yay.
are, and you
Yay.
always find the most interesting and also the most grisly stories.
It's a knack. It's a talent I have.
So you're not prim, but you're very lovely.
Yeah, what? Oh, because
Lovely.
what?
No,
what?
you're very lovely. And so when you come in with these stories that are like blood and gore, I'm like, oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, it's in there. It's in there.
No.
Yeah.
I was telling a friend at work before I came here, I was like, she was asking me, how do you guys pick stories? And I was like, well, sometimes there's stories that we want to tell. Sometimes, I'll suggest them. Sometimes you guys just find them or they're recommended to us. But I'm like, but I can always tell an Elena story. Because they're not necessarily always the ones I would pick.
Yeah.
There are some certain attributes. There's a few different key, either they're morbid or gruesome or, creepy, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, not all of them. I mean, you've definitely done some historical nice ones, but there's definitely some that I'm like, I know who wrote that one.
Right. It's true.
Well, and we should let our viewers on YouTube and our listeners know that this is our second or third attempt to record this episode because we realized after we had done it the first time that we're probably not the right people to tell this story with an authenticity that would do it justice. It's a story about a very different background, a very different world that we have not experienced ourselves. And so I think we're coming back today with the mindset of we want to put that disclaimer out there first and then also say we're trying to be very sensitive about the story we're telling because both the victim and the assailant in this crime grew up very differently than we did. And so it's easy, I think, for us to project, oh, well, I would have never done that, or that's not how I would have handled it. But we were never in those circumstances. And we were raised with many more privileges than they were. And so I just want to, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
That was absolutely perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. So here we go. Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So in the heart of the Bronx, surrounded by busy streets and towering apartment buildings, sits 979 Summit Avenue, a 7-story complex that looks completely ordinary. But inside apartment 6G, police made a discovery so horrifying it would shock the entire city.
I think it's wild because we're just talking about an apartment building in New York City, very standard, a place anybody could live. So many of our stories, we talk about these huge mansions or these massive estates that only a handful of people will ever experience what it's like to live there. I would say most of the population has experienced living in a building like this at one point in their life.
Exactly. But to really understand what happened at 979 Summit Avenue, we have to start somewhere else completely different. We're going to start a few miles south across the Harlem River and a quick geography check. Harlem is in the upper borough of Manhattan, north of Central Park. The Bronx is its own borough directly above, just across the Harlem River.
So like a little bit further north.
Yeah,
of
north
New
and
York
then
City.
north.
Okay.
If
Yes.
I'm understanding correctly. Is that
No,
Okay,
you're,
is that
you're
right?
absolutely.
I would have said, like, from my vernacular, like Harlem and the Bronx are sort of used interchangeably in Dallas, Texas. Probably much like Fort Worth and Dallas are the same.
Completely
to people
different.
that don't live. They're
so different?
And I'm sure people listening to this that live in Harlem and the Bronx are like, oh my gosh, ladies, they're
Yeah.
so different.
Get it right. Get
But
it right.
realistically, it's just a few subway stops away from each other.
So let's talk about Collin Small. Collin was born in 1979 and raised in Harlem, New York City. While not a lot is known about his early life, I wanted to give some context to what it may have meant to grow up in the 1980s Harlem. So if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we're showing you some incredible photos of 1980s Harlem from seeoldnyc.com. At this time, the demographic of Harlem was 96% Black, and the per capita income level was about $6,497. For further context, the median family household income for all of New York City was $16,818.
Okay, so that's like a very significant
That's huge.
wage gap.
So huge.
There.
Even accounting for 1979, 80s
Right.
Yeah,
prices.
I mean, it's a third, essentially.
Absolutely.
So as poverty increased in Harlem in the 1980s, public health suffered. Tuberculosis, or TB, increased in poor New York City neighborhoods. Studies show a strong correlation between poverty and TB in the 1980s and the early 1990s, especially in areas like Harlem. Many buildings in Harlem were in poor condition and overcrowded, with limited public investment contributing to deteriorating living conditions. And if you remember your history, this time period was also the height of the crack cocaine epidemic.
I mean, yeah, if I think just about 1980s New York, crime is the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, that was like, correct me if I'm wrong, Mel, because you're better at history than I am, but I feel like that was like the height of the crime wave in New York City, and they
I
were
would
really
say-
trying to clean up New York.
Yeah, the
and-
70s and 80s
Okay.
were definitely both. I mean, Times Square was a scary place to be at that time period. I mean, from my knowledge of movies, my son, his favorite time period is 70s and 80s.
Okay.
And so we watch a lot of like Taxi Driver type of movies from that time period. But yeah, it was not the Gossip Girl years
The
of
Upper East Side. Yeah.
of
Right.
New York City.
An article from the Washington Post in 1984 described Harlem's reality as, quote, a painful renaissance, high unemployment, poor housing, and deep disinvestment. Which for me, who of course looks through all these stories with a real estate hat
Right,
on,
yeah.
I wondered how much redlining and steering played into the lack of investment in Harlem.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. If you're not familiar with that term, like redlining, it really dates back to sort of the Great Depression era when, all these banks were losing money and they were worried about how do we determine if an investment's going to be a good investment, which from the outset is a great idea, right? If you're a bank lending money, you want to decide what are my parameters for a good investment. However, how they went about it has really been problematic. So they essentially did color-coded maps in the big cities across the country. And if you were, in the red portion of the map, you had a red line around your neighborhood, banks wouldn't lend money in those neighborhoods. And so, that's not just to buy a house or to sort of, if you think about how we grow our wealth in this country, you buy a starter house and then it appreciates over 10 or 15 years and you sell it and buy something else. You couldn't do that. But also, you probably couldn't get a loan to like open up a grocery store
Right.
or start a new clinic. So to your point about like the disinvestment in those neighborhoods, they were sort of left without some of the basic necessities as well.
Absolutely. And then for our part too, like not personally, but real estate agents, steering was a really big deal as well. So, you'd want to, I guess in what people were doing was they were steering certain minorities to one area and then non-minorities to another area, and just was really yuck.
It's real yuck.
It's so
Yeah.
yuck. It's so yuck.
And part of what I personally think makes a neighborhood so great is the eclectic mix of people and backgrounds. I mean, all three of us have sent our kids to magnet schools in part to get them out of the neighborhood school where, you've got this homogenous group of people, but we want you to meet people from all different backgrounds and cultures and races and ethnicities. And so, it definitely steering was the opposite of that. Like,
100%.
And I know a lot of our listeners are in Texas. We've got a lot of Californians who listen to us as well. But we're based in Dallas. So, of course, we have a lot of friends and family listeners in Dallas. So I just did a quick search on Dallas and redlining. When you were speaking about it, obviously you're like, oh, yeah, in New York City, I could see this. But it definitely happened in Dallas. The first article I found was an SMU article. It talks about 1937, Dallas government designates areas through South Dallas as red zones that are unsafe for investment. And there was a lot of discussions. These neighborhoods were considered hazardous investments, which prevented people from investing in minority areas, contributing to a large racial divide in Dallas and perpetuating segregation. It would be useful to know the history of your area and search redlining in your town, and you might find something interesting.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I like that. But those practices led to the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which outlawed discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. So thankfully, we don't engage in those practices anymore.
It might have taken a while. There's definitely a lot of the history. So even though that might have come out in 68, I bet 70s, 80s Harlem was still dealing with the history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, people are still dealing with the history now.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So despite the poverty and crime, there was also resilience. Harlem's churches, block associations, and music scene all gave people identity and strength even in the hardest years. Photography projects and historical retrospectives show that even in blighted or under-resourced blocks, Harlem was home to families, children, artists, and a sense of neighborhood identity. Another Washington Post article and other outlets have highlighted visual documentation of Harlem in the 1980s that mixes hardship with resilience and community pride. And so this is the broad environment that Collin Small and his childhood friend, Sheldon Johnson Jr., who, spoiler alert, would go on to be charged with Small's gruesome murder, grew up in.
So we were starting off with the victim. Okay.
Mhm.
That friendship with Johnson adds on another layer to the story. So obviously they knew each other, grew up around each other. In these big cities, it's still a small world. And so that adds another layer to make this even more fascinating / disturbing.
Absolutely. Now we know a little more about Sheldon Johnson Jr.'s background because after
Mouthful, sorry.
it's super mouthful.
Yeah.
From
Because
now on, just say Sheldon.
Sheldon, okay. Because after many stints in prison, he would go on to become an example of a successful rehabilitated life and had given many interviews, including on the popular podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, we were chatting about this before we recorded, and I find this fascinating. Like, after his release from prison, he starts working as this youth counselor, essentially, and he's advocating for clients in the public defender's office. And then it's one thing leads to another.
Right.
So during the course of that work, he meets this really successful civil rights attorney by the name of Josh Dubin. And Josh is super impressed. Here's this guy that's been in prison so many times. He's turned his life around. He's giving back to the community. And I think, somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like Josh had other speaking engagements, right? He was out there speaking to the public. He had been on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of times. And so that's the two of them end up on this podcast together.
He brought him in.
Right, where they end up talking about how Sheldon has turned his life around post-prison. And just to give our listeners some context, that happened in February of 2024. So he goes on the podcast, he tells a story about growth, forgiveness, giving back, all the things you want to hear that our prison system is educating people to do, right? But get this is just weeks before the murder you're about to tell us about.
Right.
Done.
Sheldon Johnson Jr. was born on May 6, 1975 at Mount Sinai Hospital. He was the oldest child of a deaf and mute couple, Sheldon Sr. and Teresa. The family had it rough from the start. His parents struggled to find work because of their disabilities, and they lived mostly off welfare and disability checks. To make things worse, his dad had a serious crack addiction, which just pulled the family deeper into poverty.
That's awful.
So
you don't have a
bad.
lot of money to begin with.
Right.
And then some of what you have is going to...
An addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the late 1970s, Sheldon Sr. had left Teresa and started a new family. Then in 1986, things got even darker. He was arrested and convicted of raping his 7-year-old stepdaughter 3 times.
Oh my God.
According to a BuzzFeed article, he pled guilty According to a BuzzFeed article, he pled guilty. Johnson claims that he committed these acts when his wife refused to have sexual relations with him because she was angry at his continued drug use.
I need to pause right there and just take like a mental health break.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
I was
All of it.
feeling kind of sympathetic. I mean, how hard, it must have been to grow up deaf and mute in Harlem. And so let's say if we're talking about 70s, 80s here, it probably was like, 50s, 60s for him. I mean, I was, feeling, a natural sympathy for him. And
Not feeling that anymore?
Yeah.
Nope.
No, it's amazing how raping a 7-year-old can really stop that.
Right. Yeah. The judge noted that Sheldon Sr. had no previous criminal record and was the family's sole breadwinner. Sending him to prison, Falcone said, quote, would entail excessive hardship to the family. Instead, the judge gave him 5 years probation. I'm going to pause for a moment to let that sink in before I ask you all what you think. Sheldon Sr. himself later said in an interview, quote, I was surprised they let me go. In what we can only consider a small blessing, he was ordered to stay out of the family home and away from his stepdaughter.
And this was what? The 80s?
Yes.
We're in the 80s.
We're in the 80s.
I mean, thank God he was forced to stay out of the family home, but like, who rapes a child and doesn't go to prison?
As someone who grew up in the 80s and doesn't think it was that long ago, and yet then I hear things like this, and it seems like a million years
Totally
ago.
different world.
Like, I would love to think, God, please, that would never happen today.
Yeah. Side note, do you remember when we were growing up in the 80s and we'd have like spirit days, like dressed like the 50s and you dress in like sock hops and poodle shirts and all that stuff? That's what the kids do now for the 90s. That's their 90s are our 50s.
I have a real hard time with
It
that.
doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense.
No, because the 90s were like 20 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I was 30. No. Yes, it doesn't make any sense.
I do feel, not to digress, and we're prone to do that I think since the advent of computers and the internet, it feels like there wasn't as significant, like huge changes. I mean, like maybe the 90s, but like after the 2000s, I don't know, maybe this is just me showing my age, but I feel like the 50s had a very significant aesthetic versus the 60s had a different aesthetic versus the 70s had a different aesthetic versus the 80s. I don't know. I feel like, the 2000s, 2010, 2020s, they all just blend together.
But like, think about today. You came in, and as is our custom, we have a little bit of wine before we start recording, and we tell each other how fabulous we look. We just build each other up for about 10 minutes before we start to record. And you walked in and you're like, oh my gosh, I love your jeans. Those are so cute. And I was like, yeah. And so I was showing them off to you, but they're a big wide leg jean, which I'm not going to I sort of hate because I have to wear heels, but they're in fashion. I'd much prefer my skinny jeans and flats, but then I get made fun of. So there is maybe it's not quite as obvious, but I think
yes, there are changes. I just don't feel like they are from poodle skirts to hippies.
That's fair.
To, the neon. I mean, I think there was a lot of, but I also think that there is nowadays with the internet, a lot of, I don't know, democratization. Like we know trends a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And better self-expression.
Yeah.
We encourage that a little more.
Uniqueness is, I do, at least maybe I hope that uniqueness is a higher value nowadays.
Well, I personally needed this little digression because I'm horrified by Sheldon Sr.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, then you have to think about if that's Sheldon Jr.'s role model, what kind of,
right.
raising?
Yes. Yeah. It's all circular.
Yeah.
So, but even after all that, Sheldon Jr. stayed in touch with his dad. He actually used his sign language to help his father buy drugs. Oh my God. Literally interpreting deals for him all the way into the early 90s. And because New York City began cracking down hard on drugs in the 80s and 90s, Sheldon Sr. spent a lot of time in prison for various drug busts. Now, Sheldon Jr.'s own story is just as chaotic. How could it not be?
Yeah.
He got his first arrest when he was 10 years old.
Oh my God. Can they arrest you at 10 years old?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Keep going.
Pause or listen to what she's about to tell you.
He was in 5th grade and tried to stab his math teacher.
Oh, okay.
Then sprayed him with a fire extinguisher when that didn't work. Apparently, the teacher had been physically abusing him, hitting his hands with a ruler whenever he got into fights at school. I don't call that physical abuse, but we grew up in the 80s.
Yeah, that's corporal punishment.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying I agree with it.
Right.
But I mean, I remember spankings in school in the 80s, late 80s,
Did you
early
get spankings
90s.
at school?
I didn't. I do remember though that it was like a transition period, much like our kids can't have cell phones now. Like it was
Yes.
a very big thing when the paddle was put away. But okay, y'all know my mom.
The
I hope
sweetest.
our listeners know my mom because I've talked about her so much. She is like God's gift to all mothers. She is a saint. She is my biggest cheerleader. Like I could call her at 2 a.m. and say, I need you to drive here right now. And she would. That lady kept a switch on top of the fridge and she threatened to use it a lot.
Love it.
Now,
I
I
love it.
probably needed it because I was a little sassy pants.
But you got it, right? Did you get swatted on the
Of course, I got swatted on the
okay.
bottom.
All right.
I wasn't abused.
Did you get spanked by your parents?
I don't remember getting spanked, but my dad definitely had the work belt that he'd snap.
I vividly recall.
Yes, he'd snap
the
it.
belt.
Yes.
The belt noise.
I don't remember though getting spanked. Maybe it's just the noise enough. I feel like my sister got spanked though. I'll have to ask her.
Yeah, I definitely got, and my parents are lovely people. This is just of their generation that, I mean, I definitely got spanked. I did spend more time with my nose in the corner. That was their punishment, was like, go put your nose in the corner. And then like my brother and I would like fall asleep with our in the corner.
And you learned a lesson.
Yeah, but I definitely did get spanked.
I will say when my son was small, I would be like, no, we don't do that, right? Like when they're like in your face, they're little, whatever.
Yeah.
And at one point, he reached over and did it back to me. And I was like, oh, well, that's not effective.
Yeah.
I couldn't fuss at him about it.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
All right, well.
I never had to spank Miles, but I tried with Brooks and he just kind of laughed.
You probably
got
got the same response.
yes, I'm
that
like,
I got.
this sucks. It's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, obviously it's not a thing we do anymore, but there is this like weird age where you're like, I don't know that you are understanding the words. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying I
Yeah.
don't think people should be villainized for it.
Right.
When they did it in correct small doses the way they did.
Yeah. And that's what it sounds like. So after that incident, Sheldon was sent to a bunch of psychiatric facilities. He later claimed he was kept sedated most of the time and that he was both molested by a psychiatrist and raped by a staff member.
Oh my gosh.
He even attacked the guy who he claimed assaulted him, but wasn't charged because he had reported what had happened. Eventually, he ran away after being locked up there for about 11 months. From then on, he was basically on his own, homeless and surviving as a squatter. At age 12, one of his older friends, a 19-year-old Shanique, brought him into the drug trade. He started as a runner selling crack and cocaine, and by his late teens, he was running his own operation. He was arrested over and over again, but always seemed to find a way back out.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. After one incident, he ended up at Rikers for 2 years and joined the Bloods while he was inside after a member of the Latin King gang at Rikers slashed his face with a razor. When Sheldon got out of prison in 1996, he went right back to crime. He was robbing people who owed him protection money from his time in prison. And during one of those robberies, he shot a man in the back. Not fatally, but he still shot a man in the back. He was arrested again, this time using the fake name Thomas Smalls. A few months later, in December of 97, he was picked up for attempted murder and robbery.
So up until like he got out of prison in 96, it was just all drugs other than, fighting back for people that were presumably abusing him.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and the rate of people who've been in prison who then go back to prison is so high. And, there's many, many reasons about that, including not having other alternatives.
Yeah. So by 1999, he turned down a plea deal that would have given him 23 years, but that backfired. He got 50 years instead with no parole for 41. 6 years into his stint in prison, he declared that he was done with gang life. While in prison, he actually started to turn his life around. He earned his GED, got an associate degree through a Cornell University program, and even helped create a few rehabilitation and education initiatives, including a dyslexia program and a civic engagement curriculum for inmates. Sheldon ended up serving only 25 years of a sentence and was released from prison in May of 2023.
Okay. That sounds promising.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Did I ever tell you that my grandma helped people get their GEDs?
Oh, no.
That was her like job outside of the home.
That's awesome.
That's
Very
nice.
cool.
In prison?
I think they were in prison. I think it was more like people that didn't graduate high school for one reason or another, but were
That's
trying
amazing.
to get that done.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's circle back to our victim in the story, Collin Small. Collin also had a history of criminal activity, and while that history hasn't been quite as well documented, we do know that he was twice convicted of felony assault and served a 10-year sentence at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. He was paroled in October of 2018. It's presumed that Collin and Sheldon knew each other as kids growing up in bordering neighborhoods. According to news reports by family members, Collin and Sheldon reconnected in 2023, with Small serving as a support system for Sheldon when he was released from Sing Sing. Remember, both men are trying to navigate a new world outside of the criminal justice system.
You want to know a fun fact?
Sure.
I feel like we should have a segment where each episode, it could be like Melanie's fun
Oh,
fact.
we should do like a music, like a little.
I was going to say, we
Yeah.
need a sound effect.
But why do we both do music like this?
Or we did.
Okay.
What does that mean?
You were looking at each other. I'm not sure what this is for music, but I'll take it. I'll take it. So I don't have a lot of fun facts of prisons, but you've probably heard that expression, he's going up the river, to kind of describe like when someone's going to prison or heading to prison. Well, that derives from the practice of sentencing people to Sing Sing prison, which is located up the Hudson River from New York City. So like, in these old historical movies or times, they'd be like, oh, sending him up the river. It was to go to Sing Sing.
I love that.
Fun
She's
fact.
good.
Okay. You're going to come up with the sound effect. And put it
Yeah.
right here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'll work
Okay,
on that.
for next time. Yeah.
I'll work on that. Thank you, Mel, for the fun fact. After his release, by all accounts, Smalls had the support of his family and appeared to be working toward rebuilding his life. He settled into the New York City borough of the Bronx, specifically 979 Summit Avenue, number 6G. The 7-story complex was a newer community built in 2016 and contained 34 residential units. Number 6G is a 409 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit and is less than a half mile from Yankee Stadium.
So you pulled the Zillow listing
Yes.
for this, and I'm going to read it to y'all because you know how much I love and hate listing descriptions.
Yes, unless you're writing it.
Well, we're going to evaluate it.
Yeah.
See how many
You will be happy
exclamations.
to know there are no exclamations.
Oh, damn. I was
Description.
thinking there was
I
going to be
know, right?
exclamations.
Mhm.
Okay.
However, they start with a very strong statement that says, life is better when you reach the summit, which I guess is what the building is called.
Yes.
East facing, 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and new construction elevator building steps to Yankee Stadium with amenities, including, these are great, listen, rooftop lounge, fitness, laundry, and bike room. I'm thinking like bike storage, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Typically,
like a Peloton room.
Yeah. No, typically in the New York City, they'll have like maybe in the basement or the first floor. I think the basement, when I've been into my friends, there's like little locked rooms where you can have storage or you could lock up a bike in there.
Security system and private parking for an extra fee. If you want that private parking, it's a little extra. Spots are limited as well. There's quick access to Manhattan via all the things they go on to list, which don't make any sense to me, subway lines and metro stops. Hardwood kitchen cabinetry, Corian countertops with energy-efficient stainless steel refrigerator and stove. Base rent includes heat, hot water, and cooking gas.
All
Now,
caps.
I have a lot of questions about that. We're already including heat, but maybe it's electric heat. I'm not sure what other kind of gas you would have.
Like a fireplace.
Maybe it's implying that the stove is a gas stove, because I know a lot of people prefer a gas stove versus an electric
maybe.
stove.
Maybe so. Okay. And then this is also interesting. It says preferred rental requirements include a 700 plus credit score, which you probably don't have if you just got out of prison.
Yeah.
They want your income to be greater than 35 to 40 times the monthly rent, which in Dallas, we usually say 3 to 4 times. So I'm thinking this has to be yearly. So $500 deposit at move-in. They require renter's insurance, and it's immediately available.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
sounds lovely.
It does sound lovely.
The pictures, we're showing some of the pictures on YouTube. Like, it's a really nice, like, new construction, very fresh and clean, well done.
I mean, I think, many of us think 400 square feet. I mean, this is tiny. I mean, let's make no mistake, this is small, but that's honestly the norm in New York City. Apartments is much smaller than, any of us would look at. But when you look at the pictures, this was, an elevator non-walk-up building near, Yankee Stadium. It's 6th floor, and there was a small penthouse on the 7th floor, but the 7th floor also had like a lounge area, rooftop. I mean, so you have outdoor access.
Do you remember what this rented for? Because I know we looked,
Remember?
and I don't think we put it in here, but I want to say it was like $2,200 or
Yeah.
$2,300 a month, something like that. Something that to me felt reasonable for New York for a new
Yeah.
building.
It's one of those reasonable for New York, but also over $2,000 a month for a 400 square foot
Yeah. I mean,
apartment.
yeah.
Let's keep this, relative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect place to start over, right?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Collin was attempting to do. Start over and rebuild his life after incarceration.
Yeah, I love that. Okay.
So this neighborhood of New York City is called Highbridge.
So this neighborhood is the Bronx, called Highbridge. It's really in the southern part of Bronx, right near the border of Harlem, but also it's only a block or two off the river. I mean, so it was a pretty, desirable, nice kind of gentrifying area.
Yeah. So he was trying to, rehabilitate himself, and then he was helping Sheldon, just, kind of all coming back together after prison. And
This is maybe a horrible analogy. Like, you and I met because we had kids at the same school. We're both real estate agents. Like, our lives align in a lot of different ways. And so we would meet and be like, how's life going for you as a mom and a realtor? It's similar. These guys
Something in
grew up in the
common.
same neighborhood. Yeah, same neighborhood. They've both been in prison. They're both out trying to like restart their lives.
Right.
It was probably a good connection. Yeah.
just different
and
paths.
to
Yeah,
brainstorm
for sure.
with each other and figure things out.
Right, exactly. But in March of 2024, things turned unbelievably tragic. Collin Small returned to his Bronx apartment on March 4th around 10 p.m. According to the building superintendent who saw him come home alone, everything seemed totally normal. Then a few hours later, about 1 a.m., neighbors started hearing gunshots.
Oh.
One person told reporters they heard someone begging and yelling something like, quote, "Please don't, I have a family," right before more shots rang out. It was that kind of sound that makes everyone freeze, but not quite sure what to do.
Yeah.
The next morning, the building superintendent checked the security camera, and what he saw was chilling.
Okay. And this is one of those things where we come back to I did not grow up in a building with a superintendent or a doorman. Like, I grew up in a residential, like, single family home neighborhood. So I don't know what's normal. But to me, you just said the next morning. So, like, presumably he wasn't there when the gunshots were heard. If he was, he didn't know about it. Like, I'm hoping he came back in at 8 a.m. and there are a bunch of these like missed call messages on his phone that's like, hey, we heard gunshots overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, but from what I heard, it was the building, the people were calling the superintendent. They weren't calling 911. They were calling the super, which is weird unto
Also,
itself.
that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it is
To
weird.
me.
Yeah. Again, exactly. Like, I don't know what's the norm.
And are these people afraid to call the cops? Like, maybe that's part of, I don't know. And that's part of why telling this story is so hard, because to me, this sounds, I'm like, why didn't you immediately call 911? If you're hearing gunshots in your building, are you worried for your own life?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a great question, Heather, but let's give the story the benefit of the doubt. And let's say the superintendent found out about it when he arrived.
Okay, I like that.
So the footage showed a man who would later be identified as Sheldon Johnson going in and out of Collin Small's apartment multiple times overnight. Each time he looked different. In one instance, he was wearing a blonde wig. He wore multiple hats. At one time, he was even in the same clothes that Collin had been wearing earlier that night.
That's creepy.
If you're watching us on YouTube, we have a photo up of at least 5 of the different looks Sheldon wore the night of the crime. Security footage also confirmed that he was seen carrying cleaning supplies and at one point a blue plastic bin. When police finally did a wellness check, Johnson was still inside the apartment. He told them that Collin had gone upstate, which didn't quite add up. Once they searched the place, they found something out of a horror movie. Collin's torso and feet were stuffed in that blue bin, and the rest of his remains were in the freezer, bagged up. He'd been shot once in the head. Detectives found even more evidence too. Things like a Tyvek suit, like the white kind that crime scene cleaners use.
I saw the picture of him because he's being led out wearing that. And I was thinking of CSI.
Yeah.
Like that's my only knowledge of what that suit is. If you've ever seen a CSI episode and you're picturing like them wearing a white suit. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. They also found things like concrete mix, cleaning materials, and bags that matched the ones found in the freezer. All pretty clear indications that he had been trying to cover his tracks. Once the arrest went public, people couldn't believe it. Sheldon Johnson had been making a name for himself lately, doing those interviews, talking about rehabilitation and second chances. He'd even been on a televised interview just days before the murder, speaking about his transformation from a blood gay leader to a reformed advocate. So when his mugshot hit the news, it felt surreal, like a total Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Well, and remind me, did he ever go to prison for murder?
No.
So, like, this would be, there were some, like, attempted murder charges.
Right.
But he had never actually murdered somebody to
That
our
he was convicted
knowledge
of. Right.
at this point.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And he was kind of in the process of developing some friends in high places, like, the high profile attorneys. I saw some articles where he had gone to some sporting events, invited by not celebrities, but people that were higher up in the area. Like, he could have been going places.
I was saying,
Right.
it's like best case scenario. You come out of prison, you're trying to restart your life, and then immediately you're surrounded by people who are impressed by you and want to help you.
Oh,
Mhm.
yes, absolutely. That's the key thing. People were looking at him as a good news story and what could happen with rehabilitation, and they definitely wanted to help
Yeah.
him.
Neighbors said the whole thing didn't make any sense. Sheldon had been seen visiting days before, and the two were known to be friends, so no one could understand how it turned so violent and how it could end this way. Even today, the motive is still unclear on why this happened. The case stunned people, not just because of how violent it was, but because of who Sheldon was. Like you got, like we were all saying, he wasn't just a former inmate; he was the face of rehabilitation.
Yeah. And I mean, he was the one telling people, like, here's how you rebuild your life. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And then it's like the minister who's telling people not to sin and then
Right.
is out there,
Well,
Yeah.
I guess we've all seen that.
Yeah. He'd even built an organization called Queen Defenders, who worked with at-risk youth and positioned himself as living proof that the system could work. And then this. It forces an uncomfortable question. How do we reconcile the image of redemption with acts of unimaginable violence?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just tragic on so many levels. Like, here are two men who both wanted second chances, and they're like both trying to move forward, and it ends in like horror, like the worst possible way.
Right. I think what stuns me most is the thought that seems to have come with cleaning up the crime.
Yeah.
Like the suit and the bins and the bags and all that stuff. I'm just like, was he like planning this, or had he been thinking about this, or not maybe specifically with Collin, but maybe that time in prison had given him time to think about how I don't know.
Well, and I would be so curious to know, and if you say this later, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, this has not gone to trial yet. So there are things we don't know
Correct.
about this crime that haven't come out.
Yeah, this is one of the few ones. There's a couple we've done that they've arrested someone, but it's so fresh that they actually haven't
Right.
gone to trial yet.
So we'll obviously do an update when that happens, but I want to know, did he bring the disguises in,
Mm-hmm.
or did he find things in Collin's apartment and wear them out? Because that's a different level of premeditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'll definitely be interesting to see how the trial proceeds and what comes out. And that's what makes 979 Summit Avenue so haunting. It's not just a crime scene, it's a crossroads where the weight of poverty, trauma, and the promise of reform all collide in one small Bronx apartment. On March 11th, 2024, Johnson appeared in court where he pleaded not guilty to charges in manslaughter, murder, weapon possession, evidence tampering, and concealment of a human corpse. The judge ordered him held without bail. In April of 2024, Johnson was indicted. Today, he is being held in a New York City jail where he is awaiting trial. Now, we've covered stories in New York before, but I feel like we haven't talked about disclosure laws in a while. So I thought we could talk about
Yeah, I like that.
disclosure
Okay.
just in New York. So in New York, landlords and sellers generally do not have to disclose crimes that happen in a rental unit or property unless it's a material fact that would affect the tenant's decision to rent, or the crime is recent, posing a current threat to safety. Now, properties where a violent or notorious crime occurred are called stigmatized properties. And in New York, there is no law forcing disclosure just because a property is stigmatized. The idea that the physical condition and safety are what matter legally, not the past events that occurred there. Some landlords might voluntarily disclose a past crime to avoid future lawsuits or complaints, but it's not mandatory. Also, keep in mind if a landlord actively misrepresents facts about a property, for example, claiming it's safe or crime-free, they could be opening themselves with fraud claims.
Okay. Well, and I think there is an interesting distinction between the disclosure for a rental property and a
Mhm.
property for sale, because the investment is very different. If you are signing a 1-year lease on a rental property and you find out that a crime occurred there or something you're uncomfortable with, you are not then in charge of releasing that property.
Mhm.
That's on the landlord.
Right.
Whereas if you purchase a property and then you have to go to sell it, that is on you. So
It's more of an investment.
it's an investment
Mhm.
issue.
Right.
And to your point, certainly most of the disclosure is around things like if somebody tripped and fell, like on the Murdaugh properties, where the housekeeper tripped and fell down the stairs, that's a disclosure issue. I mean, they say she tripped on the dogs. We're probably assuming she didn't really trip. But despite all of that, if the stairs are the issue, then that's physical to the property, and you need to disclose that to say, hey, these stairs are unsafe. Somebody died here.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But regardless, landlords, real estate agents, just like, don't go putting safe and crime free on a listing. That's a real bad idea.
Because
that's a big blanket statement.
Yeah.
And it's just a good rule of practice. Now, I think this brings up another point. Do you have your clients like do any sort of research about crimes or like safety data in a neighborhood or a property?
I don't actively say go check the police reports for this zip code or neighborhood. I do suggest going by different times of the day, but never in the light of like crime could happen here. I'm just like, check it out. Maybe there's a school down there, carpool and, all those. What's the traffic like?
It is at different times of day.
But not because I'm intentionally trying. My head just doesn't go there.
Yeah.
Like I don't think about crime.
Even though you have a crime.
I know.
I mean, I thought if anybody would be thinking that, it would be
I
you.
guess when I have a buyer out, I'm not. That's not the furthest thing from my head.
Right. You're like, come on, I want you to pick the house if it's the right house for you and it's ethical and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I don't think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I had a buyer who found their dream house, and we were ready to write an offer. And I mean, it's like everything we had been looking for. And this person called me the next day, and they said, "Don't do it. I discovered there is a sex offender very close by." And this person said, like, I realize I could buy a house and somebody could move into the neighborhood. That's out of my control. But buying into it, knowing that that person is there, makes me uncomfortable. And so, so now I just sort of do a blanket statement. I'm like, you should do your research on this. I do tell my clients to check. The Dallas actually has a great crime website where you can like put your address in and see what crimes have happened. But I always put the disclaimer in. I'm like, put the address of where you're living currently in first.
Clever.
And see what's going on around where you currently live, because what it looks like and what it feels like is very different.
And I like that.
And then plug in the address of what you're looking at.
Because you can look at somewhere new and be like, oh my God, horrified, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I can promise you, even in some of the nicest neighborhoods near us, there is a lot if someone was
and
to
probably
be looking.
90% of what I see when we plug in an address for what our clients are looking at, a lot of car crime. Like you park your car on the street, crime of opportunity, somebody walks by, smashes the window, grabs whatever's in the back seat. But
Doors unlocked, yeah. I mean, we also live in an urban area. I mean, like, urban-ish. We're not living in New York City, let's be clear, but we're also not living in McKinney, so
in the suburbs.
Exactly. So there's something to be said. There is going to always be a higher crime, but that doesn't mean that it's impacting us on a daily, monthly, annually basis.
Right.
I would think going back to this story, because it's so recent, probably anybody that's going to go and rent this apartment is going to be familiar with what happens. And because it's like an apartment building, don't you think they would like bump into people that are like, oh, much like in the Polly Class story where they're like, oh, you bought the Polly Class house.
Yeah.
Like your next door neighbor is going to be like, oh, so you rented the
Right.
Collin Small
100%.
huh?
That has to happen. Yeah.
I mean,
because it's not that big. I mean, it's a 7-story. It's not that big.
I mean, there's turnover,
Certainly.
but it's only a year ago.
And-
There's definitely.
Exactly.
I mean, geez, I've told like all my neighbors who've moved in and bought houses next to me, like I don't know, the drama, which is not major drama, like, oh yeah, that lady who used to live there. Yeah, I think she was, kind of crazy, or, she was really kind of rude, or, you tell like you tell the gossipy stuff.
Right.
So can you imagine an apartment when you have like actually something really interesting
Right.
to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing what happened in this apartment, would you rent it or would you list it for lease?
No. On both.
Neither one.
It's the body parts and places for me.
Mel?
I don't know, body parts. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a realtor. I probably would list it because I can tell it was rented fairly quickly right thereafter. So, And I also know that in New York, these listing agents, they get a lot of money. It is
Like on the lease side.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lucrative business. But anything body part related,
Yeah. And it's so small. Like
yeah,
sometimes in our stories, you're like, well, that happened in the laundry room or that happened on the front porch. This is 400 square feet. Like it happened the whole place. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm definitely a no for living there. I think the listing it would have to be like, do I just have the whole building that I'm in charge of and it's one of many? Probably.
Yeah. Well,
Is it like
yeah.
a one-off situation that's out of my way? Definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be sure to post updates. I don't know the like timeline on anything, but
Yeah.
updates on what happens with this trial. It'd be very interesting to see what comes out.
it also goes to show how long it takes for some of these trials. I mean, this is a pretty clear case, and it's been well over a year and a half from now, and there's no trial
Yeah.
yet. So that's weird.
And you didn't, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't find a lot of like stories after the fact. There's a
Mm-mm.
ton of stories like right after this happened because he was the face of this rehabilitation.
Right.
But there's not been a lot of follow up.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because it's so many layers. Like it's gruesome, and then the rehabilitation spin, and he had been nationally recognized on like a #1 podcast in the nation. And that's how fast the news cycles. Like it wasn't that long ago, and it's like forgotten like that. Like
Yeah.
there's hardly
There's also been
anything.
a lot of news in the last
There's been
year.
a lot of news. Yeah.
Let's be clear.
I'm curious, how did this come across your plate? Like, how did you hear about this?
That's a good question. I wish I could remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Welcome to being in your mid 40s.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you think about how you came across it, let us know. But
Yeah.
to our listeners, like if you guys are as fascinated and disturbed by the story as we were, we hope that you will follow Crime Estate wherever you listen to your podcast. We hope that you'll leave us a 5-star review. We hope you'll tell your friends.
Buy us a coffee.
Oh, yes, we do like it when people buy us coffee. And not very many people have done that yet. Can we be clear?
Have
They're
our
not buying
moms?
us coffee.
Have our moms done it?
No, but my mom doesn't know how to get to our podcast.
Oh, God.
God bless her. I've loaded it.
Oh.
But no, like if you love the show, like we would love for you to help support keeping the electricity on for our mics. Like we're not asking for a lot here, but do us a favor, like the show, tell your friends, buy us a coffee, leave a 5-star review, and listen again next week because we've got some really good stuff coming up.
I'm excited.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening and being a part of our Crime Estate family.
If you're curious about today's featured crime estate, you can find additional photos and details from today's episode online at crimeestate.com or on Facebook and Instagram by following at Crime Estate Podcast.
Have a crime estate we should cover? Let us know. Shoot us an email at crimeestatepodcast@gmail.com. Until next week.